One of the most common questions people ask when reading the Bible is this: what does this mean to me? That is not a bad question. It can be a useful question. It can help us think about obedience, wisdom, correction, comfort, and daily life. But it should not be the first question. Because before Scripture speaks to me, it meant something where it was first spoken. It had a setting. It had an audience. It had a problem. It had a purpose. It had a world behind it. And when we skip that world, we can accidentally apply a verse in a way the passage never meant. Most believers are not trying to misuse Scripture. Most people are sincere. They hear a verse. They feel encouraged by it. They connect it to their situation. And sometimes that connection may be helpful. But there is a danger when personal application becomes the starting point instead of the ending point. Because if I start with myself, I may never hear what the passage was actually saying. I may only hear what I need it to say. That is where context matters. Context teaches us to ask better questions first. Who was speaking? Who was listening? What was happening? What problem was being addressed? What kind of writing is this? Is this wisdom? Is this prophecy? Is this poetry? Is this a parable? Is this a letter? Is this a command? Is this a warning? Is this comfort? Is this correction? What would this have sounded like to the people who first heard it? Only after that should we ask, how does this apply now? That order matters. Because Scripture is not just a collection of standalone sentences. It is not a jar of spiritual fortune cookies. It is not a book of random motivational quotes. Scripture has flow. It has setting. It has covenant history. It has culture. It has language. It has real people dealing with real pressure, real fear, real confusion, real hope, and real correction. When we pull one sentence out and use it without its setting, we may still say something that sounds biblical. But we may not be saying what the Bible was saying. A good example is Philippians 4. Paul says, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Many people hear that and apply it to achievement. Winning. Success. Getting the job. Passing the test. Reaching the dream. Pushing past limits. And there is a general truth that Christ strengthens His people. But in Philippians 4, Paul is not mainly talking about chasing personal goals. He is talking about contentment. He says he knows how to live with little, and he knows how to live with plenty. He knows how to be brought low, and he knows how to abound. He has learned how to face hunger and abundance, need and supply. So when Paul says he can do all things through Christ, he is not saying, I can accomplish every ambition I set. He is saying, I can remain faithful in every condition Christ allows me to walk through. That is not weaker. That is stronger. Because now the verse is not just about ambition. It is about endurance. It is about contentment. It is about being steady whether life is comfortable or uncomfortable. Context did not take the verse away. Context gave it its weight back. The same thing happens with Jeremiah 29:11. Many people quote it as if God is promising a quick personal breakthrough. For I know the plans I have for you. That verse is beautiful. But in Jeremiah 29, the people of Judah are in exile. They are not being told, everything is about to become easy. They are not being told, your hard season ends tomorrow. They are told to build houses, plant gardens, have families, seek the peace of the city where they have been sent. In other words, they are being told to live faithfully in a place they did not want to be. The promise is real. But it is not shallow. It is not a quick escape promise. It is covenant hope in a long season of discomfort. God is saying His purpose has not collapsed, even though their situation is painful. That is deeper than a slogan. That is why context matters before application. Without context, we may apply Jeremiah 29:11 as if hardship means breakthrough is about to happen immediately. But with context, we learn something stronger. God can still be faithful when the waiting is long. God can still have purpose when His people are in a place they would not have chosen. God's promise is not always instant rescue. Sometimes it is faithful presence inside a long rebuilding season. That kind of reading helps people mature. It does not just excite them for a moment. Another example is Matthew 7, where Jesus says, "Judge not, that you be not judged." Many people apply that as if Jesus meant, never correct anything, never discern anything, never call anything wrong, never question behavior, never make a moral judgment. But if we keep reading, Jesus talks about taking the log out of your own eye before dealing with the speck in your brother's eye. So the issue is not discernment itself. The issue is hypocritical judgment. Jesus is warning against correcting others while refusing to examine ourselves. That changes the application. The application is not ignore everything. The application is start with humility. Do not use truth as a weapon while hiding from your own correction. Do not act like a surgeon when you have not dealt with the blindness in your own eye. Again, context sharpens the teaching. It does not weaken it. This is where many people get nervous. They hear someone talk about context, and they think it means Scripture is being made complicated. But context does not have to be complicated. Sometimes context is as simple as reading the verses before and after. Sometimes it means asking who was speaking. Sometimes it means asking who was being corrected. Sometimes it means noticing whether the passage is poetry, prophecy, wisdom, gospel, parable, or letter. Because we do not read every kind of writing the same way. We do not read a parable the same way we read a direct command. We do not read poetry the same way we read a historical account. We do not read Proverbs the same way we read Romans. Proverbs often gives wisdom patterns. Romans gives theological argument. Psalms gives worship, grief, prayer, praise, and poetry. The prophets often bring warning, grief, covenant correction, and hope. The Gospels show Jesus inside Israel's story, not detached from it. Paul's letters were written to communities with actual tensions, questions, and failures. When we know what kind of writing we are reading, we apply it better. This does not mean the Bible is only for experts. That is not the point. A regular believer can read Scripture faithfully. But faithful reading requires humility. It requires slowing down. It requires not treating every verse like it was written as a personal text message directly to our modern situation. The Bible can speak to our modern situation, but it does that best when we first listen to what it was already saying. That is the difference between application and projection. Application says, "Let me understand what God was saying, then live faithfully from that truth." Projection says, "Let me place my situation onto the verse, and make the verse serve my immediate feeling." That is where we have to be careful, because sometimes we do not want the meaning of the text. We want relief. We want confirmation. We want a promise that makes us feel better. We want a verse that agrees with our plan. We want Scripture to tell us what we already hoped was true. But Scripture was not given just to agree with us. It was given to form us, correct us, comfort us, warn us, teach us, train us, expose us, restore us, and lead us into faithfulness. That cannot happen if we only read for quick emotional use. Personal application still matters. The goal is not to leave Scripture trapped in the ancient world. The goal is to understand the ancient world so we can apply Scripture more faithfully in our own. So yes, ask what this means for your life. But ask it after better questions. What did this mean in its setting? What was God revealing here? What was being corrected? What was being promised? What was being commanded? What would the first audience have heard? Then ask, how should this shape my trust? How should this shape my obedience? How should this shape my relationships? How should this shape my thinking? How should this shape how I handle fear, money, anger, forgiveness, pressure, power, weakness, and pride? That is real application. Not grabbing a verse to decorate our plans, but letting Scripture reshape the way we see. Context matters because Scripture deserves to be heard before it is used. That may sound strong, but it is true. Many people use verses before they listen to them. They post them, quote them, apply them, build sayings around them. But they never slow down long enough to ask what the passage was doing in the first place. And when that happens, even a true verse can be used in a shallow way. But when we slow down, the Bible becomes richer. Not because we are adding meaning to it, but because we are finally paying attention to the meaning that was already there. Before we rush to apply Scripture, we should pause. Not because application is wrong, but because faithful application needs faithful listening. The Bible was not written as a pile of disconnected quotes. It was given through real people, real history, real language, and real covenant purpose. So the better order is simple. First listen, then understand, then apply. Because when context comes before application, Scripture is not made weaker. It becomes clearer. Ancient context. Clearer Scripture.